Hey guys, tonight we begin with an herb that stops a woman from bleeding to death after childbirth, but gets locked in the forbidden box because it also prevents pregnancy when used differently, which means effectiveness matters less than controlling reproduction, or medical knowledge gets restricted based on what bodies are allowed to do, rather than what treatments actually work. This is about monastery infirmaries in 13th century England, those careful medical spaces where monks maintain herb gardens and treat the sick according to approved remedies, while keeping locked boxes of forbidden plants that work better than approved ones but threaten religious doctrine about reproduction and women's bodies and natural suffering. It's not about dramatic poisonings or heretical medicine. It's about 1 year when an infirmary keeper realizes that the herbs locked away as forbidden would save lives that approved herbs can't save, and what that realization reveals about how medical knowledge gets suppressed, how effectiveness matters less than ideology, and how learning which treatments are forbidden and why is how you understand which suffering is considered acceptable and which lives are considered worth saving.
Before we begin, let me ask something. If you're the kind of person who thinks about how medical knowledge gets restricted, about how effectiveness conflicts with ideology, about the difference between what works medically and what's allowed socially, you're in exactly the right place. Take a moment to subscribe to Quiet Manor Story if that sounds like you, and tell me in the comments about times you've seen effective treatments restricted for non-medical reasons. I'm genuinely curious who joins me for these explorations of how healing becomes controlled. Now settle in and let's discover what happens when an infirmary keeper counts the deaths that could have been prevented by herbs sitting locked in the forbidden box and realizes he's choosing ideology over lives every time he follows the rules about what he's allowed to use.
The monastery is St. Cuthbert's Abbey in Yorkshire, and the year is 1267. It's Benedictine monastery, maybe 40 monks. The infirmary is small building near the main cloister. This is where sick monks are treated, also where local villagers come when seriously ill, because the monastery is the only source of medical care for miles. The infirmary keeper is a monk named Brother Edmund. He's 34 years old and has held this position for 8 years. He was trained by the previous infirmary keeper, knows herbs, knows treatments, knows what works and what doesn't based on years of observation. The infirmary has extensive herb garden, grows dozens of medicinal plants, also has dried herbs imported from continent. The collection is valuable, represents centuries of accumulated medical knowledge. Most of these herbs are approved by church authorities, listed in authorized medical texts, safe to use according to religious doctrine. But some herbs are forbidden, locked in special box that only Brother Edmund has key to. He's not supposed to use them, not supposed to even show them to patients. They're kept as curiosity, as a reminder of dangerous knowledge that monks must resist. That's official purpose. Brother Edmund keeps them because occasionally they're necessary despite being forbidden. That contradiction is what this story explores.
The forbidden herbs are forbidden for different reasons. Some are associated with pagan practices, were used in pre-Christian healing rituals. The Church forbids them not because they don't work, but because using them implies accepting pagan spiritual framework. Some herbs are associated with women's medicine, were traditionally used by midwives and wise women. The Church forbids them as part of effort to control women's bodies and women's knowledge, particularly herbs that affect reproduction, that prevent pregnancy or induce miscarriage or ease childbirth. These are especially forbidden because they give women control over reproduction that church doctrine says belongs to God. Some herbs are simply too effective, work so well they seem magical. The church forbids them because effectiveness without prayer suggests healing comes from nature rather than divine intervention. that threatens theological framework that says suffering is meaningful and healing requires God's mercy accessed through prayer and sacraments. Herbs that work too reliably undermine that framework, make healing seem mechanical rather than spiritual. That's dangerous from church perspective. So the most effective herbs are often forbidden, locked away, kept from sick people who need them, because saving lives matters less than maintaining theological control over what healing means and how it occurs. Brother Edmund knows which herbs work, knows from 8 years of observation, knows that approved herb A treats fever moderately well, knows that forbidden herb B treats fever much better, knows that approved herb C sometimes stops bleeding, knows that forbidden herb D stops bleeding reliably, knows that approved herbs for childbirth complications are mostly ineffective, knows that forbidden herbs for childbirth complications work consistently. He has this knowledge, has accumulated it through careful observation of results, has documented it in private notes he keeps hidden, because documenting effectiveness of forbidden herbs is itself questionable. His notes show clear pattern. Forbidden herbs are forbidden precisely because they work. The most effective treatments are the most restricted. That's not coincidence, that's policy. The Church restricts effective treatments that threaten doctrine. Better to let people suffer and die while using approved ineffective treatments than save them with forbidden effective ones. That's the calculation. That's what Brother Edmund maintains every time he follows rules about what he's allowed to use. He's complicit in unnecessary deaths, complicit in unnecessary suffering, complicit in suppression of medical knowledge for ideological reasons. That complicity is becoming harder to maintain, growing harder each time someone dies who could have been saved, growing impossible as Brother Edmund counts the unnecessary deaths and realizes what he's doing. March 1267. A woman from nearby village comes to the infirmary. She's in labor. Been in labor for 2 days. She's exhausted. The baby isn't coming. Both she and the baby will die if labor doesn't progress. The midwife has done everything she can with available knowledge, sent the woman to monastery infirmary, hoping monks have better treatments. Brother Edmund examines her, knows immediately what she needs. Ergot. It's a fungus that grows on rye, causes powerful contractions, speeds labor, saves women in exactly this situation. Brother Edmund has ergot in the forbidden box. It's forbidden because it's also used to induce miscarriage, used by women who don't want pregnancies. The Church forbids it because allowing women to control when they give birth threatens doctrine that reproduction is God's domain. So ergot is forbidden, locked away, can't be used even in situations like this where it would clearly save lives. Brother Edmund must choose. Use forbidden herb and save woman and baby, or follow rules and let them die. He's faced this choice before, has always chosen rules, has let people die rather than violate prohibition, has maintained ideology over lives. This time feels different, maybe because he's been counting, been documenting in his private notes, been calculating how many deaths could have been prevented. The number is growing uncomfortably large. The woman is screaming, dying, taking her baby with her. Brother Edmund reaches for the key to the forbidden box. He uses the ergot, prepares it carefully, administers correct dose. The woman's contractions intensify, labor progresses. The baby is born alive. The woman survives. Both recover. It's clear medical success. Effective treatment saving 2 lives that would have been lost. Brother Edmund has violated the prohibition, has used forbidden knowledge, has prioritized effectiveness over ideology, has chosen lives over rules. That choice changes everything. Not externally. Nobody except Brother Edmund knows he used forbidden herb. The woman and midwife think he used approved treatment. They don't know what ergot is, don't know it's forbidden. They just see successful outcome. But Brother Edmund knows he crossed line, knows he violated prohibition deliberately, knows he can't unknow that the forbidden herb worked and the approved alternatives wouldn't have. That knowledge creates obligation.
creates awareness that every future death from conditions treatable with forbidden herbs is death he's choosing, death he's allowing through obedience to ideology rather than commitment to healing. That awareness is unbearable, makes it impossible to return to unquestioning compliance with restrictions on medical knowledge. Brother Edmund has changed, has become someone who knows what he's supposed to do and what actually helps, and has chosen to prioritize helping over obeying. That's dangerous transformation, dangerous knowledge, dangerous commitment. But he can't reverse it, can't unknow what he knows, can't accept unnecessary deaths now that he's proven they're preventable.
If you're feeling that recognition of effectiveness versus ideology, of rules that cause unnecessary suffering, of systems that restrict knowledge for purposes unrelated to healing, that's exactly why I make these videos. The way medical treatments get forbidden for theological reasons. Subscribe to Quiet Manor Story if you want to see how Brother Edmund navigates this impossible position, and share your thoughts about modern equivalents to this kind of suppression of effective treatments.
April. Brother Edmund uses forbidden herbs twice more. Once for infection that approved herbs couldn't treat, but forbidden herb clears immediately. Once for severe pain that approved remedies don't touch, but forbidden herb relieves completely. Both times he acts openly, during daylight, in the infirmary, not hiding, not sneaking around at night like guilty person. He's made decision. He'll use what works, will prioritize healing over prohibition, will accept consequences if discovered. That openness is what without night means. He's not conducting secret forbidden medicine in darkness. He's conducting effective medicine openly during day, rejecting the shame and secrecy that prohibition tries to impose, claiming that using treatments that work is legitimate medical practice regardless of Church's ideological restrictions. That claim is heretical. That openness is dangerous. But Brother Edmund has decided that shame should attach to letting people die for ideological reasons, not to saving them with effective treatments. He's reversing the moral framework, declaring that prohibition is shameful and violation is righteous. That's radical reversal. That's conscious defiance. That's Brother Edmund choosing which values to prioritize and accepting that his priorities contradict his order's official doctrine.
The infirmary has other monks who work there, junior monks learning medicine. They notice Brother Edmund using herbs they don't recognize, using preparations not mentioned in authorized texts. They ask questions. "Brother Edmund, what herb is that?" He answers honestly. "It's from the forbidden box. It works better than approved alternatives. The patient needs effective treatment." The junior monks are shocked. "But it's forbidden. We're not allowed to use those herbs. You taught us that." Brother Edmund nods. "I taught you what I was supposed to teach, what the rules require. I've changed my mind. The rules are wrong. They prioritize ideology over healing. I'm a healer. My obligation is to patients, not to ideology. When those conflict, I choose patience." The junior monks don't know how to respond. They've been trained to obey, trained that rules come from divine authority, trained that questioning is dangerous. Brother Edmund is their teacher, their superior. He's telling them to disregard fundamental principle of their training. That's destabilizing. That's confusing. That's forcing them to choose between obedience and conscience in ways they're not prepared for. Some accept his reasoning, start learning about forbidden herbs, start observing their effectiveness, start questioning the prohibitions. Others are troubled, conflicted, uncertain whether Brother Edmund is wise heretic or dangerous rebel. The debates begin. Quiet debates. Conversations in the infirmary when no senior monks are present. Arguments about whether effectiveness justifies violation, about whether saving lives matters more than following rules, about whether Brother Edmund is right to prioritize healing or wrong to violate prohibitions. These debates are the heart of the story. They're happening openly, during day, in the infirmary workspace, not hidden, not whispered, just discussed as serious question that monks are grappling with together. That openness is significant. That's what without night
means. The debates aren't secret, aren't shameful, aren't hidden in darkness. They're conducted openly as legitimate theological and practical questions about how medical knowledge should be used and restricted. One junior monk named Brother Paul becomes Edmund's ally, sees immediately that the forbidden herbs are more effective, sees that prohibitions cause unnecessary suffering, sees that Edmund is right to prioritize healing. Brother Paul is 24 years old, intellectually curious, not blindly obedient. He starts studying the forbidden herbs systematically, comparing them to approved alternatives, documenting their effectiveness, creating evidence that supports Edmund's position. His documentation is careful, scientific, shows clear patterns. Forbidden herb X treats condition Y in 3 days, with 90% success rate. Approved herb Z treats same condition in 2 weeks with 40% success rate. The difference is stark, repeated across multiple conditions. The forbidden herbs are consistently more effective. That effectiveness is precisely why they're forbidden. Paul's documentation makes this pattern undeniable, makes it impossible to claim the prohibitions are medically justified. They're ideologically motivated, designed to control medical practice and women's bodies and the meaning of suffering, not to promote effective healing. Paul and Edmund discuss this openly in the infirmary, develop shared understanding, coordinate their resistance to prohibitions, become partners in quiet defiance of restrictions they both consider unjust. That partnership is important. Edmund isn't alone anymore, isn't solitary rebel, has ally, has support, has someone who validates his judgment that the rules are wrong. That validation makes continued resistance sustainable, makes it feel less like personal failing and more like legitimate medical judgment, makes Edmund's position stronger both practically and psychologically. He's not just violating rules on his own authority, he's building consensus among monks who actually practice medicine that the prohibitions are harmful and should be disregarded. That consensus is foundation for systematic change rather than just individual rebellion. Brother Martin takes opposite position. He's older monk, 42 years old, works in infirmary as assistant. He's troubled by Edmund's violations, believes strongly in obedience, believes the rules exist for good reasons, even if those reasons aren't always apparent, believes that violating prohibitions is dangerous spiritually, regardless of medical effectiveness. Brother Martin argues with Edmund regularly. You're risking your soul to save bodies. Bodies die anyway. Souls are eternal. You're trading eternal salvation for temporary physical healing. That's wrong calculation. Edmund responds, souls aren't my responsibility. Bodies are. I'm healer, not priest. My obligation is to reduce suffering. The herbs reduce suffering effectively. Using them is fulfilling my obligation, not violating it. Martin isn't satisfied. Your obligation is to God first, to church doctrine, to holy obedience. Using forbidden knowledge is pride, is claiming your judgment is superior to church's wisdom. That's sinful regardless of medical results. Edmund doesn't have perfect answer to this. Martin's logic is internally consistent if you accept premise that spiritual obedience matters more than physical healing. Edmund has rejected that premise, has decided that healing is primary obligation. That makes the debate unresolvable. They're operating from different fundamental values, can't convince each other because they don't share common ground. But the debate continues, raises questions, forces other monks to consider where they stand, creates space for systematic questioning of prohibitions that everyone previously accepted without examination. That questioning is the quiet debate. That's what Edmund's violations have raised. Not secret conspiracy, but open theological and practical discussion about whether medical effectiveness should override doctrinal restrictions. That debate is happening step by step, as each new case forces monks to confront the contradiction between what works medically and what's allowed doctrinally. That's the process. That's how systematic questioning develops, not through dramatic confrontation, but through accumulated cases that make contradiction undeniable.
That's happening without night, openly, during regular infirmary work, as visible part of daily medical practice, rather than hidden secret activity. Edmund is making the forbidden herbs and the debates about them part of normal infirmary function. That normalization is his strategy, making what was forbidden into what's routine, making what was shameful into what's necessary. That's how he's working step by step to change how the infirmary operates and what treatments are considered legitimate.
June brings crisis. A monk from the monastery gets seriously ill. High fever, delirium. He's dying. The approved treatments aren't working. Brother Edmund knows that one of the forbidden herbs would likely cure this. Wolfsbane, carefully prepared in tiny doses, is powerful fever treatment, but it's extremely forbidden, associated with witchcraft. Using it on another monk rather than anonymous villager is much more risky. The whole monastery will know about the treatment. Edmund can't hide it. Must decide whether to let his brother monk die while using ineffective approved treatments, or save him with forbidden herb and face consequences. Brother Paul urges Edmund to use wolfsbane. He'll die otherwise. You know it works. You can't let him die to maintain pretense of obedience when you've already decided the rules are wrong. Brother Martin urges restraint. If you use forbidden herbs on one of us, you'll be discovered, reported, punished. Better to accept God's will regarding this monk's fate than risk the entire infirmary's work by revealing your violations. Edmund is paralyzed. The dying monk is friend, someone he's known for 15 years. Letting him die feels unconscionable, but Martin is right that using forbidden herbs openly on monastery member will trigger investigation, will end Edmund's position, will potentially close the infirmary or install new keeper who'll lock away the forbidden herbs permanently. Edmund must calculate one life now versus many lives in future. That's brutal calculation, utilitarian mathematics that Edmund finds morally repugnant. But he must decide. The monk is dying. Edmund has maybe 6 hours before death becomes inevitable. He needs to choose now. Use forbidden effective treatment and save friend while risking position, or follow rules and maintain position while watching friend die. There's no good option, just 2 bad choices with different distributions of harm. Edmund chooses saving his friend, uses the wolfsbane, prepares.
It with extreme care because it's poisonous in wrong doses. Administers it. The fever breaks. The monk recovers. It's clear medical success. Also clear violation that's visible to entire monastery. Edmund has crossed another line, has used forbidden knowledge on fellow monk in front of witnesses who know what wolfsbane is and know it's forbidden. Edmund has made public choice, has declared openly that he'll prioritize effectiveness over obedience, even when doing so endangers his position. That declaration changes monastery politics, forces confrontation, makes the quiet debates suddenly quite loud. The monastery must respond, must decide whether Edmund's violation is acceptable medical practice or unacceptable heresy. That decision will determine whether Edmund continues as infirmary keeper or gets removed, whether forbidden herbs continue being used or get locked away permanently, whether effectiveness or ideology wins this particular institutional conflict. The crisis forces resolution, makes what was gradual systematic questioning into sudden explicit confrontation. Edmund is ready, has been building towards this, has allies, has documentation, has arguments prepared, has moral conviction that he's right, has decided he'll defend his position regardless of consequences. That commitment makes him formidable, makes him more than lone rebel, makes him leader of reform movement within monastery medical practice. Brother Paul supports him. Several junior monks support him. Even some monks outside infirmary support him because they've seen the results. They've watched people survive who would have died. They've witnessed effectiveness. That witness creates constituency for Edmund's position,
creates pressure on monastery leadership to accept that maybe the prohibitions are wrong. Maybe medical effectiveness should override doctrinal restrictions. Maybe saving lives matters more than maintaining ideological purity about which herbs are acceptable. That's the argument
Edmund will make. That's the debate that's been raised quietly over months and now erupts publicly because Edmund saved Friend's life with forbidden treatment in front of everyone. The quiet debate has become loud crisis. The systematic questioning, step by step, has led to explicit confrontation. The work done without night, openly, visibly, during regular practice, has created a situation where monastery must decide whether Edmund is right or wrong, must take a position, can't ignore anymore. That's what Edmund has accomplished through his gradual violations and open debates. He's forced institution to address the contradiction between doctrine and effectiveness, forced explicit choice, made the forbidden herbs and their effectiveness into question that monastery must answer, rather than suppress. That's substantial achievement for one monk with limited power. That's how institutional change begins. Through making contradictions visible, through forcing conversations, through building constituencies, through accumulating evidence, through gradual violations that demonstrate viability of alternatives, through open debates that establish legitimacy of questioning. Through all of that, Edmund has made forbidden herbs discussable, made their effectiveness undeniable, made the prohibitions questionable. That's changed monastery's relationship to medical knowledge. Whether monastery leadership acknowledges that change or suppresses it remains to be seen, but change has occurred regardless. Edmund has successfully raised quiet debates that work step by step without night to undermine absolute prohibition of effective treatments. That's his achievement through 8 months of conscious resistance. Whether it survives official response is question for next phase. But Edmund has proven that resistance is possible, that questioning is possible, that alternatives are viable, that effectiveness matters, that saving lives justifies violating restrictions. That's what he's established. That's
what he's defended. That's what he's made real through systematic use of forbidden herbs and open advocacy for accepting their effectiveness as legitimate basis for medical practice. That foundation won't disappear regardless of what happens next. The abbot summons Brother Edmund 3 days after the wolfsbane treatment. The recovered monk has spoken about his treatment. Word has spread through monastery. Everyone knows Edmund used forbidden herb. The abbot must respond, can't ignore open violation of church doctrine. The meeting happens in the abbot's chambers. Present are the abbot himself, the prior, the monastery's spiritual director, and Brother Martin, who has formally complained about Edmund's practices. Edmund brings Brother Paul at his documentation. The abbot begins. Brother Edmund, you've been accused of using forbidden herbs, of violating church prohibitions, of teaching junior monks to disregard doctrine. These are serious charges. What's your response? Edmund has prepared for this, has rehearsed arguments, has decided to defend his practices openly rather than apologize or hide by technicalities. The charges are accurate, Father Abbot. I've used herbs from the forbidden box. I did so to save lives that approved treatments couldn't save. I've taught junior monks about these herbs because they're effective, and monks training in medicine should know what works. I've disregarded prohibitions I consider unjust and harmful to my patients. I stand by these decisions.
The room is silent. Edmund's openness is shocking. He's supposed to apologize, to claim he made mistakes, to beg forgiveness. Instead, he's defending violations, claiming prohibitions are unjust, standing by his actions. That's not how these proceedings usually go. The abbot recovers. You admit to heresy, to placing your judgment above church doctrine, to teaching others to violate holy prohibitions. You understand these admissions could result in your expulsion from the order, in your excommunication, in spiritual damnation. Edmund nods. I understand the consequences, Father Abbot. I accept them if that's your judgment. But I won't apologize for saving lives.
I won't pretend the prohibitions are medically justified when they're not. I'm obligated to heal. When rules prevent healing, I disregard them. That's my position. If the order can't accept that position, then perhaps I don't belong in the order. But I won't lie about what I've done or why. This is defiance. Clear, calm, unapologetic defiance. Edmund has decided that martyrdom is acceptable price for maintaining integrity. That's dangerous position, dangerous conviction. But it's genuine. Edmund means it. Would rather be expelled than violate his conscience by pretending the prohibitions are justified. That genuineness gives him power, makes him hard to dismiss as a rebel seeking attention or heretic pursuing error. He's a sincere believer who's reached different conclusion about what faithfulness requires. That's harder to condemn than simple disobedience.
Brother Paul intervenes. Father Abbot, may I present evidence? He shows the documentation. Comparison of effectiveness between forbidden and approved herbs. Clear patterns. Significant differences in success rates. Compelling evidence that forbidden herbs work better. The abbot examines the documents, sees the data, sees that Edmund and Paul have been systematic, have created real evidence. This isn't casual violation. This is deliberate medical judgment based on observed results. The abbot is thoughtful, asks questions. This documentation suggests forbidden herbs are more effective, but effectiveness isn't only consideration. These herbs are forbidden because they're associated with pagan practices, with women's unsanctioned medicine, with control over reproduction that belongs to God alone. Using them means participating in framework that contradicts our doctrine. How do you respond to that theological concern? Edmund answers carefully. The herbs aren't pagan or Christian, Father Abbot. They're plants, created by God like all plants. They have properties. Those properties can heal or harm depending on use. The Church has labelled certain plants forbidden based on how they were used historically, but the plants themselves are neutral. Using ergot to save a woman in difficult childbirth isn't participating in pagan framework, it's using God's creation to preserve life. That seems consistent with our calling to heal the sick and comfort the suffering. The prohibition seems to be about control rather than theology, about preventing women from controlling their reproduction rather than about heresy. I don't see theological justification for letting women die in childbirth because the effective treatment could also be used to prevent pregnancy. That calculation prioritizes control over life. I can't accept that as Christian principle.
If you're recognizing that tension between doctrine and effectiveness, between ideological control and practical healing, between what authorities demand and what conscience requires, that's exactly why I make these videos. The way institutions use prohibition to maintain control at the expense of human welfare. Subscribe to Quiet Manor Story if you want to see how this confrontation resolves, and share your experiences with being forced to choose between obedience and doing what actually helps.
The spiritual director speaks. Brother Edmund, your argument is essentially that medical effectiveness overrides doctrinal prohibition, that your judgment about what plants God created us to use supersedes the Church's judgment about which practices are acceptable. That's pride. That's the root of heresy, claiming individual judgment superior to institutional authority. How do you defend that position? Edmund considers. I don't claim my judgment is superior in all matters, Father. I claim competence in medical matters. That's my training, my calling, my daily work. I observe what works. I document results. I have expertise the Church hierarchy doesn't have. When Church doctrine conflicts with medical reality, I observe, I trust my observation because it's based on evidence, while doctrine is based on historical prohibitions that may not have been medically informed. That's not pride. That's appropriate reliance on expertise. You trust me to diagnose illness, to prescribe treatments, to manage infirmary. That trust acknowledges my competence. I'm asking that trust extend to my judgment about which treatments work, including judgment that some prohibited treatments are more effective than approved ones. That's consistent trust, not selective obedience, where you trust my medical judgment except when it conflicts with prohibitions that weren't created by people with medical expertise.
The prior objects. The prohibitions exist for spiritual reasons. You're reducing them to medical questions, missing the point. We're not just treating bodies, we're caring for souls. Your violations might save bodies while endangering souls, yours and your patients'. That's poor trade. What profit man to gain world but lose soul? What profit woman to survive childbirth through forbidden means but face damnation for participating in unsanctioned medicine? Edmund responds immediately. I don't believe God damns people for accepting effective medical treatment. That theology makes God cruel, makes suffering artificial test rather than natural tragedy we should alleviate. I reject theology that says dying in childbirth is spiritually superior to surviving through effective herb. That theology serves church control, doesn't serve God or patients. I'm willing to risk my soul by violating that theology. I'm not willing to risk patients' lives by following it. That's my conscience. I can't betray it even under orders. That's his line. That's where Edmund won't compromise. He's placing conscience above obedience, claiming moral duty to violate rules he considers unjust. That's Protestant position. That's Reformation theology. That's heresy in 1267, when church authority is absolute and individual conscience has no standing to override institutional doctrine. Edmund is articulating principles that won't be acceptable for another 300 years. He's too early, too ahead, too convinced that individual moral judgment matters more than hierarchical obedience. That conviction makes him dangerous, makes him heretic, makes him someone who must be suppressed or whose position must be accepted. No middle ground exists. Either conscience has standing against doctrine or it doesn't. Either medical effectiveness can override theological prohibition or it can't. Either Edmund's violations are acceptable or they're heresy. The monastery must decide which. This meeting is that.
Decision point.
Brother Martin argues for condemnation. Brother Edmund has admitted everything, has defended his violations, has claimed his judgment superior to church doctrine, has taught others to violate prohibitions, has endangered souls through heretical medicine. The appropriate response is clear. He should be removed from infirmary position, should be confined to cell, should be disciplined spiritually until he renounces these errors. The forbidden herbs should be destroyed. The junior monks should be warned against Edmund's teachings. The infirmary should be purified of heretical practices. That's what obedience requires, what doctrine demands, what spiritual safety necessitates. The abbot listens, considers. The tension is unbearable. Edmund waits. He's made his case, defended his position, accepted consequences, now waits for judgment. The abbot finally speaks. Brother Edmund, your position is heretical according to strict interpretation of church doctrine. Your claim that individual medical judgment can override institutional prohibition is revolutionary, dangerous, theologically unsupportable. However, your results are undeniable. You've saved lives. Your documentation is compelling. Your patients benefit from your expertise. The monastery benefits from having effective infirmary. I'm unwilling to destroy that benefit for sake of doctrinal purity. Therefore, I propose compromise. You may continue using herbs from forbidden box when medically necessary, but quietly, without teaching junior monks, without creating documentation, without public advocacy. You'll exercise your medical judgment privately, maintain appearance of obedience publicly. The forbidden herbs will remain locked. You'll have key. You'll use them when conscience requires, but discreetly, without raising further debates. Can you accept that compromise?
Edmund is torn. The compromise allows him to continue healing effectively, allows use of forbidden herbs, doesn't require him to let people die for ideological reasons. That's substantial victory. But it requires hiding, requires secrecy, requires Edmund to stop advocating openly, to stop teaching junior monks, to stop documenting effectiveness, to pretend compliance while privately violating. That's cowardly compromise. That's accommodation that preserves hierarchy while allowing limited individual violation. That's exactly what Without Night rejects. Edmund has been working openly, conducting effective medicine publicly, refusing shame and secrecy, claiming his practices are legitimate, not shameful, claiming they should be accepted, not hidden. Accepting this compromise means abandoning that claim, means accepting that his practices are shameful, should be hidden, are tolerated exceptions rather than legitimate medicine. Edmund hesitates. Brother Paul whispers, "Accept it. It's better than expulsion. You can still help people, still save lives. The secrecy is annoying, but survivable. Don't throw away ability to practice medicine for sake of open advocacy. Take the compromise." Edmund knows Paul is right practically, but it feels like betrayal. Feels like accepting that effectiveness must hide from ideology, that medical knowledge must remain suppressed even when proved superior. That's what he was fighting against. That's what raised the quiet debates, the systematic questioning, the open practice. All of that gets lost if he accepts secret practice in exchange for public compliance. But refusing means expulsion, means losing position, means someone else becomes infirmary keeper, someone who'll lock away forbidden herbs, someone who'll let people die. That's worse outcome than compromise. Edmund knows this intellectually, but emotionally it feels like defeat.
He accepts the compromise. I'll practice discreetly, Father Abbot. I'll use forbidden herbs when medically necessary. I'll maintain appearance of compliance. I'll stop public advocacy. The words taste bitter, feel like surrender, but Edmund accepts them, accepts that full victory isn't possible, accepts that limited compromise, allowing continued practice, is better than principled martyrdom that helps nobody. The abbot is satisfied. The monastery is satisfied. Brother Martin is disappointed Edmund wasn't expelled, but accepts the compromise. Brother Paul is relieved. Edmund is hollow. He's won permission to continue, but lost the public advocacy that made his practice meaningful, lost the open debates, lost the teaching, lost the documentation, lost the systematic challenge to prohibitions, kept only the ability to privately violate when he judges necessary. That's insufficient victory, but it's what's available. Edmund accepts it, returns to infirmary, continues working, uses forbidden herbs when needed, but quietly now, secretly, without the openness that characterized his 8 months of resistance. That openness is gone. The work continues, but without night has become partially with night. Edmund hides his most effective treatments, pretends compliance while privately violating. That pretense feels corrupt, feels like betraying his own principles, but he maintains it because the alternative is abandoning healing entirely. That's the compromise. That's what institutional power extracted from individual conscience. Permission to act privately in exchange for silence publicly. That's how systems maintain control while accommodating limited violation. They allow exceptions while suppressing advocacy, allow practice while prohibiting teaching, allow individual use while preventing systematic change. Edmund has become such exception, has been granted personal permission to violate prohibitions he convinced leadership are sometimes wrong, but that permission is individual, doesn't extend to others, doesn't change rules, doesn't establish new precedent, just creates exception that proves rules' continued existence. That's deliberate, that's designed, that's how power accommodates challenge without yielding authority, by granting exception that keeps challenger quiet. That's what's happened to Edmund. He's been granted exception, required to stay quiet. Accept it or lose everything. Those are his options. He's chosen exception, chosen quiet, continued practice over loud, terminated advocacy. That choice makes sense practically, feels like failure morally. Edmund lives with that contradiction, continues healing, continues saving lives, continues using forbidden herbs, but quietly now, without debates, without teaching, without documentation, without systematic challenge, just private practice hidden behind public compliance. That's his reality after the confrontation. That's what compromise produced. Limited permission, required silence, continued effectiveness, lost advocacy. Mixed outcome, insufficient victory, practical necessity, moral compromise. Edmund carries all of that, continues working, wonders whether he made right choice, whether accepting compromise was wisdom or cowardice, whether he should have refused, risked everything, maintained principles completely, even if it meant losing position and helping nobody.
Those questions don't have clear answers. Edmund lives with uncertainty, lives with compromise, lives with the tension between what he's allowed to do and what he's forbidden to say. That tension defines his practice going forward.
August. Edmund is using forbidden herbs regularly, saving lives, helping patients, but silently. Nobody except Edmund and the patients know what treatments are used. The junior monks no longer learn about forbidden herbs. Brother Paul continues practicing what Edmund taught him, but doesn't teach others. The knowledge stays contained, doesn't spread. That containment is what the compromise requires. Edmund resents it, resents having to hide effectiveness, resents pretending approved treatments are adequate, resents the secrecy that makes his most successful work invisible. But he maintains the pretense, maintains appearances, fulfills his part of the compromise. One day a village woman arrives, same condition as the woman Edmund saved in March, dying in prolonged labour. Edmund knows ergot will save her, prepares to use it secretly. But the woman's husband is present, asks what Edmund is doing. Edmund must choose. Tell truth and violate secrecy agreement, or lie and maintain compromise. He lies. I'm preparing approved remedy, something that might help. Uses ergot while pretending it's approved treatment. Saves woman's life while deceiving her family about how. That deception feels corrupt, feels like betraying patients. They deserve to know what treatment saved them, deserve to know it was forbidden herb used despite prohibition, deserve to understand that church restrictions nearly killed them. But Edmund can't tell them, can't risk them telling others, can't risk knowledge spreading beyond permitted bounds. So he lies, saves life through deception. That's what the compromise requires. Lying to patients, hiding effectiveness, maintaining fiction that approved treatments are adequate. Edmund hates it, hates lying, hates hiding, hates the secrecy that makes successful medicine shameful. But he continues, because the alternative is letting the woman die, is prioritizing honesty over life, is valuing his comfort with truth-telling more than patient survival. Edmund
Can't make that choice, can't value his principles above patient's life, so he compromises his principles, lies to maintain ability to practice, lives with shame of deception. That's what secret practice requires. That's the cost of the compromise. Edmund pays it, continues paying it. Each patient saved through forbidden herbs involves deception. Each success requires lie. Each effective treatment is hidden behind false claim of using approved methods. The accumulation of lies is heavy, makes Edmund feel corrupt, makes successful practice feel dirty. That's deliberate. That's what secrecy does. Makes effective practice feel shameful, makes healer feel guilty for healing. That's how prohibition maintains power even when violated, by requiring violation to be hidden, by demanding shame accompany success, by making healer complicit in suppressing knowledge of their own effectiveness. That's what Edmund experiences. That's the burden of compromise. Success achieved through deception, effectiveness hidden behind compliance, medical knowledge suppressed even while being used. All of that weighs on Edmund, makes him question whether compromise was worth it, whether he should have refused secret practice, should have demanded either full permission to advocate openly or complete prohibition requiring him to stop, should have rejected the middle ground of hidden violation that allows practice while preventing teaching. These questions torment Edmund, make him wonder whether he's healer serving patients or collaborator maintaining a system that suppresses medical knowledge. Both seem true. Both are true. Edmund is simultaneously resisting prohibition by using forbidden herbs and maintaining prohibition by hiding their use. He's both opponent and accomplice of the system. That contradiction is unbearable intellectually, but it's his reality practically. He lives it, works within it, saves lives while lying about how. That's what compromise produced. That's what step-by-step descent.
From open advocacy to secret practice looks like. Edmund went from working completely without night, openly conducting effective medicine and raising debates publicly, to working partially with night, hiding his most effective treatments behind false claims of using approved methods.
That regression is painful. That's what institutional power accomplished, forced Edmund from openness to secrecy, from advocacy to silence, from teaching to hiding, from systematic challenge to isolated exception. That's victory for hierarchy. Edmund maintains individual effectiveness, while hierarchy maintains systematic prohibition. Nobody else learns, nobody else questions, nobody else advocates. Edmund's resistance becomes contained, becomes manageable exception rather than growing movement. That containment was the goal. That's what the compromise achieved. Edmund understands this, understands he was outmaneuvered, understands he accepted terms that serve hierarchy's interests more than medicine's advancement. But he accepted them anyway, because rejecting them meant helping nobody. That's the trap. That's how systems maintain control. By making opposition's choices so stark, accept compromise that neuters advocacy, or lose ability to practice at all, that resistance accepts compromise, becomes contained, stops spreading. Edmund fell into that trap, accepted containment, maintains his individual practice while abandoning systematic challenge. That's his second defeat. First was being forced to choose. Second was choosing compromise over principles. Both defeats are rational given circumstances. Both feel like failures morally. Edmund lives with both, continues practicing, continues lying, continues saving lives while suppressing knowledge, continues being simultaneously healer and accomplice. That duality defines him now. That's who he's become through confrontation and compromise.
Edmund maintains secret practice for 3 years, 1267 through 1270, uses forbidden herbs regularly, saves maybe 40 lives that would have been lost using only approved treatments, hides every use, lies to every patient about what treatment saved them, maintains public appearance of compliance while privately violating. The deception accumulates, gets heavier, makes Edmund increasingly cynical about his position and his choices. He's effective healer. He's also systematic liar. Those identities don't reconcile well. The cognitive dissonance grows unbearable. Edmund starts making mistakes. Not medical mistakes, he's too careful for that, but mistakes in maintaining the deception. He forgets to hide the forbidden herbs after using them, mentions them to junior monks who weren't present during his teaching period, refers to their effectiveness in casual conversation before catching himself. These slip-ups are increasing. Edmund is cracking under pressure of maintaining dual practice. The secrecy is unsustainable psychologically, even if it's practically functional. Edmund needs relief, needs to either return to open practice or abandon effective treatments entirely. Can't continue split existence indefinitely. The compromise that seemed like practical solution in 1267 has become psychological torture by 1270. Edmund must change something, must choose different approach, must either embrace secrecy completely or reject it completely. Partial acceptance while resenting it is destroying him.
Brother Paul notices Edmund's deterioration. They talk privately. Paul suggests Edmund write down the knowledge, create manual about forbidden herbs, their uses, their preparations, their effectiveness, not for current teaching, but for preservation, for future generations who might be ready for knowledge that current hierarchy suppresses. Write what you know, Paul urges. Document everything. Hide it carefully. Let it survive even if current practice remains secret. Knowledge that exists can resurface. Knowledge that's never recorded disappears forever. Edmund considers this. Writing the knowledge feels like defiance, like rejecting complete suppression, even while accepting current restrictions, like preserving something for future, even if present remains constrained. It appeals to Edmund, gives purpose beyond just maintaining secret practice, gives way to resist suppression systematically, even while complying practically. Edmund begins writing, in secret, late at night, private documentation that nobody except Edmund and Paul know exists. The manual grows. Descriptions of 40 forbidden herbs, their properties, their uses, their preparations, their dosages, their risks, comparative effectiveness versus approved alternatives, evidence from Edmund's years of observation, case studies showing results, detailed, careful medical documentation that would be heretical if discovered, but is invaluable as medical knowledge. Edmund writes knowing this might be his legacy, knowing his secret practice will die with him unless knowledge is preserved, knowing that writing creates risk but also creates possibility, possibility that future monks will find this manual, will learn what Edmund learned, will question prohibitions Edmund questioned, will use effective treatments Edmund used, will continue what Edmund started even after he's gone. That possibility makes the writing meaningful, makes suppression incomplete, makes Edmund's knowledge survivable beyond his lifetime.
That small rebellion, quiet resistance, working without night in sense that Edmund is documenting openly in his manuscript, even while practicing secretly in Infirmary. The manuscript is his truth-telling, his refusal to completely accept suppression, his legacy statement that effective treatments exist and prohibition is wrong regardless of what hierarchy maintains. That statement is dangerous. That manuscript could destroy Edmund if discovered, but it's necessary psychologically, necessary for maintaining integrity, necessary for believing his knowledge matters beyond his immediate practice. Edmund writes knowing risks, accepting them, choosing preservation over complete safety. That choice somewhat redeems his compromise, somewhat restores his sense of being active resistor rather than passive accommodator. The writing makes him feel less corrupt, less collaborator, more rebel, even if rebellion is private and hidden and known only to himself and Paul. That private resistance is something, is better than nothing, is enough to make continued practice bearable.
1271. Brother Martin discovers the manuscript. He's suspicious of Edmund, has been watching for violations of the compromise. Searching Edmund's quarters while Edmund is in infirmary, finds the manuscript hidden under floorboards, reads it, realizes what Edmund has been doing, documenting forbidden knowledge, preserving heretical medicine, creating manual that could spread prohibited practices beyond monastery. This is worse violation than secret practice. This is attempting to institutionalize forbidden knowledge, to make it teachable, to ensure its survival. That threatens not just current prohibitions, but future enforcement. Martin must report this, must expose Edmund's continued defiance, must end this threat to proper doctrine. He brings the manuscript to the abbot. Brother Edmund has violated the compromise, has been documenting forbidden knowledge, creating manual of heretical medicine. This proves he never accepted the compromise genuinely. He's been working to undermine prohibitions systematically while pretending compliance. He must be expelled. The manuscript must be destroyed. The infirmary must be purified. The abbot reads the manuscript, sees Edmund's careful documentation, sees the medical knowledge, sees the evidence of effectiveness, sees also the heresy, the systematic defiance, the refusal to accept suppression. The abbot is troubled. Edmund has clearly violated the compromise's spirit, even while maintaining its letter, has practiced secretly as agreed, but has also documented systematically, despite agreement to stop, creating evidence. That's double violation, operating within compromise while subverting it. Edmund must be confronted again, must explain why he wrote the manuscript, must face consequences for continued defiance.
Thank you for staying with this difficult exploration of how medical knowledge gets suppressed, how effective treatments get forbidden for ideological reasons, how individuals navigate between conscience and obedience when systems demand they prioritize doctrine over healing. If this changed how you think about institutional control of medical knowledge, about effectiveness versus ideology, about how information gets preserved despite suppression, subscribe to Quiet Manor Story and share your thoughts. Where do you see effective treatment still being restricted? How do institutions maintain ideological control over medical practice? How does prohibited knowledge survive and spread despite official suppression? I genuinely want to hear your reflections on these questions that remain urgently relevant.
Edmund is summoned, confronted with manuscript, asked to explain. He doesn't deny authorship. I wrote it, Father Abbot. I documented what I've learned. I violated the compromise by creating this record. I accept consequences. The abbot is exasperated. Why, Brother Edmund? You had permission to practice. Why risk everything by documenting? Why not accept the compromise and maintain your position? Edmund explains carefully.
The compromise required me to practice secretly, to hide effectiveness, to let knowledge die with me. That's one generation of successful medicine, then return to ignorance. I couldn't accept that, couldn't let knowledge disappear. So I wrote it, preserved it, made it possible for future monks to know what I know. That violates the compromise, but it serves medicine, serves future patients, serves truth. I chose that over my position. That's my answer. The abbot stares at him. You're incorrigible. You accept compromise, then subvert it. You practice secretly, then document openly. You claim obedience while plotting systematic defiance. You make it impossible to trust you, impossible to accommodate you. I should expel you immediately. Edmund nods. You should. I've earned it. I violated agreement deliberately, made conscious choice to prioritize knowledge preservation over my position. If expulsion is consequence, I accept it. But I won't apologize for writing, won't claim it was wrong, won't cooperate in suppressing medical knowledge just to maintain my comfortable position. That's Edmund's line again, same position as before. Conscience over obedience, medical knowledge over institutional compliance, principles over personal interest. He means it, would rather be expelled than claim the manuscript was mistake. The abbot knows this, knows Edmund is genuine, knows expelling him means installing a new infirmary keeper, who'll be less effective, who'll let people die that Edmund would save. That's poor trade. The monastery needs Edmund's medical
skill even if it doesn't want his defiance.
The abbot makes surprising decision. The manuscript will remain here, in my custody, locked away, available to future abbots, not destroyed, not shared, but preserved. You'll continue as infirmary keeper. You'll continue practicing secretly. You'll not create additional documentation. You'll not teach forbidden knowledge. But this manuscript won't be destroyed. It will exist, hidden, preserved, available to future leadership if circumstances change. That's my judgment. Edmund is shocked, expected expulsion, expected manuscript destruction, expected complete suppression, instead gets partial preservation. The knowledge survives, locked away, hidden, but not destroyed. Future generations might access it, might learn from it, might question prohibitions based on evidence Edmund compiled. That's not complete victory, but it's substantial survival. It's acknowledgement that knowledge has value, even when current hierarchy rejects it. It's permission for possibility that future might judge differently than present. That's more than Edmund hoped for. He accepts. Thank you, Father Abbot, for preserving the manuscript, for allowing continued practice, for not demanding complete suppression. I'll honor this new arrangement. We'll practice secretly. We'll not create additional documentation. We'll maintain the compromise more carefully. I accept these terms gratefully. The abbot nods. See that you do. This is final accommodation. No more violations, no more discoveries, no more manuscripts. You practice medicine effectively. I preserve your knowledge for possible future use. We both accept limitations. We both compromise. That's the arrangement. It holds unless you violate again. Edmund agrees, returns to infirmary, continues practicing, continues using forbidden herbs secretly, but doesn't write more, doesn't teach, doesn't advocate, just practices, saves lives, maintains quiet effectiveness, accepts that his knowledge survives in hidden manuscript while his practice remains
secret. That's what's possible. That's what he's achieved through 2 rounds of confrontation and compromise. Not systematic change, not open acceptance of effective treatments, just preservation of knowledge and permission for secret practice. That's insufficient. That's also significant. That's all Edmund could accomplish, given his position and his hierarchy's resistance. He accepts it, makes peace with it, continues working within constraints. That's his resolution. That's his accommodation to reality. He wanted revolution, got limited reform. Wanted systematic change, got individual exception. Wanted forbidden knowledge accepted, got it preserved but suppressed. That's distance between ambition and achievement. Distance between what was desired and what was possible. Distance between Edmund's conscience and his hierarchy's doctrine. That distance is permanent. Edmund lives within it.
continues practicing, continues saving lives, continues being effective healer, bound by unjust restrictions he violates carefully, while accepting he can't eliminate. That's his reality for remaining years.
Edmund serves as infirmary keeper until 1284, 17 years after first violating prohibitions, 17 years of secret practice, 17 years of saving lives while hiding how, 17 years of compromise between conscience and obedience. In those 17 years, Edmund saves maybe 200 lives using forbidden herbs, 200 people who would have died using only approved treatments, 200 successes hidden behind lies, 200 deceptions required by a system that forbids effective medicine. Edmund counts them, knows each case, remembers each lie, carries all of it, the accumulated weight of secret practice, the accumulated shame of systematic deception, the accumulated knowledge that he helped people while maintaining a system that suppressed helping. That duality never resolves. Edmund never reconciles it, just carries it, lives with contradiction, accepts that he's simultaneously healer and collaborator, helper and accomplice, resistor and maintainer. All of those are true. None cancel out others. Edmund is all of those things. That complexity is what makes him human rather than hero, makes his story realistic rather than inspirational. He did what he could, saved lives he could save, preserved knowledge he could preserve, compromised when forced, resisted when possible, accepted limitations he couldn't overcome. That's not perfect moral achievement. That's practical navigation of impossible position. That's what most people do when conscience conflicts with power. They compromise. They find ways to maintain some integrity while accepting some complicity. They save what they can while accepting they can't save everything. That's Edmund's pattern. That's his legacy. Not heroic transformation of medicine, not dramatic defeat by hierarchy, just persistent navigation of contradictions that never fully resolve, but allow continued practice that helps more than it harms, even while accepting it could help more if restrictions didn't exist. That
middle position is uncomfortable, is unsatisfying narratively, but it's honest position. It's what Edmund actually achieved. It's what quiet resistance accomplished. Preservation of knowledge, individual effective practice, systematic suppression continuing, all simultaneously. That's the reality. That's what happened. That's what Edmund's 17 years produced.
He dies in 1284 at age 51. Heart fails suddenly. He's working in infirmary, treating patient, falls, dies before anyone can help. Quick death, unexpected. Brother Paul succeeds him as infirmary keeper. Paul knows about forbidden herbs, knows Edmund's practices, knows where key is kept, continues Edmund's secret practice, uses forbidden herbs when necessary, hides their use, maintains deception, continues what Edmund started. The knowledge transfers, doesn't die with Edmund, survives through Paul. That's victory. Small victory. One person successfully teaching one other person, despite prohibition against teaching. That's how forbidden knowledge survives, through careful selective transmission that violates rules quietly, through individuals willing to teach despite prohibition, through recipients willing to learn despite risks. Through that quiet transmission chain, Edmund's knowledge persists beyond his death. Brother Paul passes it to trusted junior monk 20 years later. That monk passes it to another 30 years after that. The chain continues. Fragile chain, easily broken, but surviving. Transmitting forbidden knowledge generation to generation through careful secret teaching that violates official prohibition while maintaining its appearance. That's how suppressed knowledge persists. Not through open institutional acceptance, through quiet individual transmission that operates underneath official structure. That's what Edmund initiated, that careful secret teaching chain that continues long after his death. That's his legacy. Not the manuscript locked in Abbott's chambers, not his saved patients who don't know what saved them, but the transmission chain he started, the teachers who learned from him and taught others, the forbidden knowledge that survives through systematic violation of prohibition against teaching it. That survival is Edmund's achievement. That's what his resistance produced. Not accepted effective medicine, but surviving forbidden
knowledge.
Not systematic change, but persistent violation. Not revolution, but continuing quiet resistance. That's what was possible. That's what Edmund accomplished. That's his legacy.
The manuscript surfaces 200 years later, 1484. Different abbot, different England. The Reformation is beginning. Church authority is being questioned. Medical knowledge is advancing. The intellectual climate is different, less hostile to questioning, more open to evidence. The current abbot finds Edmund's manuscript while organizing archives, reads it, realizes its value, sees that Edmund documented effective treatments that are still forbidden but shouldn't be. The abbot shares the manuscript with monastery's current infirmary keeper, suggests careful evaluation of whether Edmund's observations remain valid, whether forbidden herbs really are more effective, whether prohibitions serve medical purposes or only ideological control. The current infirmary keeper, Brother Thomas, coincidentally, studies the manuscript carefully, tests Edmund's claims, finds they're accurate. The forbidden herbs work as documented, are more effective than approved alternatives. Brother Thomas begins using them, not secretly, openly. The Reformation has created space for questioning church doctrine, for challenging inherited prohibitions, for prioritizing effectiveness over tradition. Brother Thomas advocates for accepting Edmund's knowledge, for removing prohibitions that suppress effective medicine, for acknowledging that church was wrong to forbid these treatments. That advocacy succeeds, not completely, not immediately, but gradually, over decades. The Protestant rejection of Catholic authority extends to medical prohibitions. The forbidden herbs become controversial rather than absolutely prohibited, then become accepted for specific uses, then become standard treatments. By 1600, most of Edmund's forbidden herbs are approved medicine, used routinely, taught openly, no longer suppressed. Edmund's manuscript becomes historical curiosity, evidence that effective treatments were once forbidden for ideological reasons, proof that medical knowledge survives even systematic.
Suppression if someone documents carefully and later generations question inherited prohibitions. That's Edmund's final vindication, not in his lifetime, not even in his century, but eventually. His knowledge proves valuable, his documentation proves essential, his resistance proves justified, the prohibitions he violated prove unjust. History judges Edmund correctly, even though his contemporaries judged him heretical. That historical vindication matters, maybe. Or maybe it doesn't. Edmund is dead, doesn't benefit from being proven right posthumously. The patients who died because Edmund practiced secretly rather than openly don't benefit from later acceptance of treatments that could have saved them if used without restriction. The vindication is cold comfort, abstract justice that doesn't undo concrete harms caused by prohibition during its enforcement. Edmund probably wouldn't care about vindication, would care only that the knowledge survived, that effective treatments eventually became accepted, that future patients benefit from understanding he developed and preserved. That's what mattered to him. That's what motivated his documentation. Not personal vindication, medical advancement. Not abstract justice, concrete helping. That motivation was right. That focus was appropriate. Edmund cared about healing, about effectiveness, about reducing suffering, about preserving knowledge, about teaching when possible, and documenting when teaching was forbidden. Those were right priorities. Those motivated his resistance. Those justified his violations. Those make his story worth telling, even though it's not heroic narrative of triumph, but realistic narrative of partial persistence through compromise and suppression.
The pattern Edmund embodied repeats constantly. Medical knowledge gets restricted for non-medical reasons. Effectiveness conflicts with ideology. Healers must choose between conscience and obedience. Some comply completely, let patients die rather than violate prohibitions. Some resist completely, get expelled or worse, lose ability to help anyone. Most navigate middle path,
Edmund's path: secret practice, hidden effectiveness, documented knowledge preserved despite suppression, careful teaching when possible, compromise when necessary. That middle path is a common pattern. That's how forbidden knowledge actually survives, not through dramatic resistance, through quiet, persistent violation, through systematic small disobediences, through refusing complete suppression while accepting partial restrictions, through working step by step to preserve what can be preserved while accepting what can't be changed immediately, through working without incense of refusing shame about effective practice, even while accepting need for secrecy, through maintaining that effectiveness matters regardless of prohibition, that healing justifies violation, that medical knowledge has value independent of institutional approval. Those principles sustained Edmund, sustained transmission chain he initiated, sustained preservation of knowledge through 2 centuries of suppression, until circumstances changed, until ideology shifted, until prohibitions became questionable rather than absolute, until Edmund's forbidden herbs became accepted medicine. That transformation took 200 years, required Protestant Reformation, required breakdown of Catholic medical authority, required systematic questioning of inherited restrictions, required new generation willing to test old prohibitions, required courage from Brother Thomas in 1484, similar to courage from Brother Edmund in 1267, required persistent resistance across generations. That's how systematic change happens, not instantly, not
through single person, through accumulated resistance, through multiple people choosing conscience over obedience across decades and centuries, through documentation that preserves knowledge, through teaching that transmits understanding, through questioning that challenges prohibition, through all of that gradually undermining absolute authority until prohibitions become controversial, then become eliminated. That's the process. That's what Edmund initiated. That's what his story teaches. That forbidden herbs in Infirmary box raise quiet debates that work step by step over centuries to transform prohibited knowledge into accepted practice. That transformation isn't dramatic, isn't quick, isn't complete victory for any individual resistor, but it's real transformation, real progress, real change in what's permitted and what's prohibited. That change matters. That change saves lives. That change vindicates Edmund's resistance, even though vindication comes too late for Edmund personally. That delayed vindication is what persistence produces. That's what working without night over generations accomplishes. Not immediate transformation, not complete victory, but eventual change, gradual acceptance, systematic improvement. That's sufficient achievement. That's worth the resistance. That's why Edmund's story matters, not because he single-handedly changed medicine, because he contributed to a process that eventually changed medicine, because he preserved knowledge that eventually became accepted, because he resisted prohibition that eventually became eliminated, because he did what he could from his position, with his resources, given his constraints. That's replicable achievement. That's accessible resistance. That's how individuals contribute to institutional change, even when they can't force change immediately. Edmund's pattern is template. Document what you know. Teach when possible. Preserve when teaching is forbidden. Practice effectively, even when required to hide.
Effectiveness. Refuse complete suppression even while accepting partial restriction. Work openly when possible and secretly when necessary. Maintain that effectiveness matters regardless of prohibition. Trust that knowledge preserved can resurface. Trust that future generations might judge differently. Trust that persistence across time accomplishes what individual action cannot achieve immediately. That trust sustained Edmund. That pattern worked. That's the lesson.
That's what Forbidden Herbs in Infirmary box taught through quiet debates that worked step by step without night across centuries to transform medical practice from ideologically controlled to evidence-based. That transformation is incomplete, still ongoing, still facing resistance, still requiring individuals willing to question prohibitions and document effectiveness and teach forbidden knowledge and preserve understanding despite suppression. Edmund's pattern continues, his story repeats, different contexts, different restrictions, different forbidden treatments, but same essential conflict: effectiveness versus ideology, evidence versus doctrine, conscience versus obedience, healing versus control. That conflict is permanent feature of how institutions manage knowledge, how power restricts information, how doctrine suppresses effectiveness. Edmund's response is permanent model: resist when possible, compromise when necessary, document always, teach when able, preserve knowledge regardless, trust future. That model works, that resistance matters, that's the conclusion. That's what Edmund's 17 years of secret practice and preserved manuscript and transmitted knowledge accomplished. Systematic, persistent, partial resistance that contributed to eventual transformation, even though Edmund didn't live to see it. That's sufficient legacy. That's meaningful achievement. That's why his story deserves telling. That's what quiet debates raised by Forbidden Herbs reveal about how medical knowledge survives.
Suppression, and eventually becomes accepted despite institutional resistance.